Roche.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to take a serious call on the first three clauses of the Gambling Amendment Bill number 3. These three clauses deal with the title, the commencement, and also the Principal Act. And in preparing what I was going to say in this portion of the Committee of the Whole House here, I went and looked at the Principal Act again. And I think it's worthwhile to kind of summarise what it says in the Act, which is the purposes of that Act, the 2003 Gambling Act. And it says, it's got about 9 different purposes, but the ones that I'll only refer to about 4 or 5 of them. And they are A, to control the growth of gambling, and B, prevent and minimise harm from gambling, including problem gambling, and D, facilitate responsible gambling, and G, ensure that money from gambling benefits the community. Now, if we remember, sir, the whole point of Class 4 gambling is to provide funds for the community, funds for charitable purpose, and a few other things that New Zealand First had got into the bill previously around racing. However, those are the purposes of the original Act, and this bill, I believe, actually cuts right across those purposes, because this bill is, although it's called an Amendment Act or Amendment Bill, actually removes a significant portion of the purposes of the original Act, and they don't measure up. So the removal of the prohibition to pay venue operators on a commission basis, the removal of that from the 2003 Act essentially cuts right across the purposes in the original Act around preventing and minimising harm, including problem gambling, facilitating responsible gambling, and those two absolutely crucial parts of the 2003 Act. So I find it unusual that this provision is even in that Act, that it's in this amendment bill, because we don't really know where it came from. We heard during the submission process, we heard from venue operators and from the Pokie Trust themselves that they were quite keen to have this. And we've heard an assurance in the House from the Minister to say that there will be a provision in the regulations around this Act which will restrict the commission-based payments system from being exploited and creating problem gambling. But, sir, we don't know what those regulations say now, and this is an assurance that we've had that actually cuts right across the purposes of the original Act, which is to prevent and minimise harm from gambling. Now, in the previous parts of the bill, I was pretty disappointed that my supplementary order papers around minimising gambling harm by introducing player tracking and pre-commit cards, that was voted down, because that would have been the ideal opportunity for this Act to measure up with the purposes of the original Act. Yep. However, this is not what we've got here. So I think that leads us to the point where we have to say that this bill has been misnamed, that actually it's not the Gambling Amendment Act number 3. It's really the let's have lots of pokey rorts, please, bill. Or it's the, because it expands the opportunity for problem gambling. And we know, sir, because we'd seen the evidence that was presented to us by the Department of Internal Affairs from their mystery shopper sting, that many of the venue operators in New Zealand who currently have Class 4 licences to run, to operate pokie machines in their premises do not comply with the host responsibility that is also outlined in the purposes of the original Act. And so when you combine that with the provision in this bill, which will allow for commission-based payments, you have to ask yourself, what is going to be the consequences of that? And sir, given that low rate of compliance with the host responsibility from venue operators, you have to say
The consequences will be, Sir, Mr. Chair, the consequences, I believe, will be an increase in problem gambling and more pokey operators rorting the system in order to fleece their pockets. And I guess the other thing that cuts across the purposes of the original Act, and the original Act is named in Clause 3 of this bill, is the extension, and the clause in this bill, which is around extending the licences for those venue operators and for those pokey trusts. Now, Sir, this worries me because while the Minister has said that this is to be an incentive for good behaviour, frankly, we haven't seen much good behaviour. So I see no point in providing the ability in this bill to extend licences for good behaviour when it hasn't happened. What I would rather have seen, and I'm pretty sure the Department of Internal Affairs gambling compliance team as well, would rather have seen, is that good behaviour operating first before we change the law. Because, Sir, again, if that's outlined in regulations, we have no way of deciding now whether it's going to work or not. So on the whole, Sir, this bill offers an enormous relaxation of the gambling laws to the industry, which enables the industry to practice bad behaviour. The incentivisation of problem gambling in order to increase the commission-based payments to the venue operator is one. And basically we know that they're not meeting their obligations now in most cases. Sir, we don't know where the commission-based payment system came from or who asked for it. We didn't see that in any of the information that came through to us, and it cuts right across the purposes of the original Act. So we should rename this bill. This bill, when it comes in, by order of royal assent, we could be calling it, I don't know, the Problem Gamblers Enablers Bill. We could be calling it the Venue Operators Make a Mint Bill. I could go on, Sir, but I won't because you're looking quite glazed. Thank you.
Clayton,